Hello, everyone. Jim Coventry from RotoWire here. We are going to talk some fantasy football draft strategy from concepts I learned in the Pros versus Joes draft, which is on July 31st. Now, the link to the draft board can be found on my Twitter page at Jim Coventry NFL. So make sure you find that. You can follow along if you'd like. You can see what everybody did there. However, I'm going to go over my draft and I'm going to explain. I learned some really good lessons. Now, the first thing about Pros versus Joes, there are 6 very, very strong fantasy analysts and 6 very strong high stakes fantasy players. Darren Armani of FantasyMojo.com puts this together. FFPC sponsors it. They have the FFPC Radio Hour does that. Eric Balkman and Farrell. It's a great group. They talk about it. So if you want to hear a breakdown of the draft pick by pick, they do a wonderful job of that as well. So anyway, I picked in the 5 spot. Now, this is a 1 quarterback league. It is super flex. It's 12 teams, as I said, but the things are 20 roster spots. And obviously with best ball, the best scorers come up in your lineup each week. You don't have to set a lineup. That changes the way maybe you approach certain players. So in this draft with the 5 pick, there have been 3 other Pros versus Joes drafts to that point. And across the board, the first 4 picks were pretty universal. It was Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Cooper Kupp, and Justin Jefferson. So pretty much I understood that's the way it was going to go. And I planted my flag on Dalvin Cook. And if you've heard my other videos, you can go back on my content here, the explanations as to why I believe Dalvin Cook is set up for a phenomenal season based on the new offensive system he'll be in. Then he is my player who I am definitely targeting in drafts. And I expected him to be at 105. So this was funny. So we get to the 5th pick. Travis Kelce goes 4th. Now, I failed to mention it's a tight end premium league. So a tight end is a very, very justifiable pick there. So anyway, Jefferson falls to 5, and I grab him. I'm like, you know what? I'm not letting Justin Jefferson go past me right here, because in this very competitive league, and one more thing I want to add, in this league, there are no playoffs. It's your total points through week 17. And if you don't finish in first place, you lose. So it's the team with the most points. So therefore, floor and ceiling are very important. So therefore, I prioritize Justin Jefferson over Cook, because although I believe Cook's going to have a great season, I think the probability of Justin Jefferson staying healthier are stronger. Now, any player can get hurt, and we know that. But that's the beginning of the change, and I want to talk to you about this draft strategy. You go in with a plan, but then your plan sometimes has to change on the fly. Mine did. Now, this is where it was funny. I picked Jefferson, but the draft room was really wonky. I couldn't see like the icons for the teams, and I thought my computer was giving me issues. Apparently, they were having server issues. So once I picked Jefferson, they stopped the draft. They backed out the prior 3 picks. So it went back to Taylor first and Cooper Kupp second. And then I'm like, oh man, somebody made a mistake on a pick, and now I'm going to have to, not get Justin Jefferson. Well, it worked out as I patiently waited the next few minutes that I did get Jefferson again at 5. So again, my draft strategy was now changed. I did plan, my initial plan, and I think this is a great plan for drafts this year, is to make sure you get out of the first 5 rounds with a combination of 5 running backs receivers. It could be 3 and 2, 2 and 3. Now, some people like a tight end in there. Fine. I'm personally going with the 3 and 2 mix, however that falls. But once I took Jefferson, I knew it was going to be a little more difficult to get running backs. And in the 2nd round, so I'm picking, again, the 5th pick. So we come back around. We're near the end of the 2nd. And in a PPR league, there are not a lot of running backs at this point that I'm really interested in, because we already had about 10 running backs off the board. I really like when Aaron Jones falls to that point of the 2nd round. In about half of the leagues, not even half, 30% he falls, 70% he doesn't. Scott Pianowski of Yahoo Sports did take him with the 16th pick. I was picking about 21, so no problem there. So I was not going to get Aaron Jones. The running backs on the board for me were Nick Chubb, Leonard Fournette, who I did consider, Alvin Kamara. Those are like the 3 running backs who were kind of next. I don't trust Kamara's situation. I think last year he was not an efficient runner. Nick Chubb, I love him as a player, just doesn't get enough work for me to spend a 2nd round pick on. And then Fournette, I know his weight's back in question, but last year he had 3 games when he had over 50 snaps. It was the only time all year he had multiple games with that many snaps. And after that, he blew out a hamstring and missed 4 games. So I am concerned about, they give him a higher workload, him holding up. So With my second round pick, I went with another wide receiver. Totally not my plan. I went with T. Higgins. Again, I was hoping to come out with Cook and Jones. Again, Jones was not really going to be very likely. But so now I'm going receiver. And so now my draft is completely going to change around here. And this is the point of draft strategy. You have to be pliable within the context of the draft. So now I get to my 3.05 pick. And the running backs on the board at this point are James Conner, Travis Etienne, and Cam Akers. Those are the only three at that point that I would consider. Now, again, you know my stance on James Conner if you listen to me. I believe that he's a 3-down back. He has very little competition for work. He's in a system that spreads the field. So, I think he is a bell cow running back. And I actually have him well above his ADP. He was running back 15 on the board. I have him right about running back 11. So for me, it was a no-brainer to take Conner because that's where my draft board goes. So now I have Jefferson, Higgins, and Conner. And actually, it's 3 players on really good offenses, and I like that as well. So now we get to the 4th round. And the running backs are really drying up. So after Conner, then ETN did go, and then Cam Akers went. Akers is a player who had a reasonable chance of falling to me in the 4th round, and he didn't. He was a player I really would have liked to have had. So at that point in the 4th round, now the receivers on the board are Terry McLaurin, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf. They're good. They're great. But they weren't players I was really targeting. I really needed a running back here. The running backs on the board at that point were Elijah Mitchell, Breece Hall, and David Montgomery. And I love David Montgomery, and he's been very effective with the Bears. I just have the sneaking suspicion that Khalil Herbert's going to be a little more of a thing than he was last year with the new coaching staff. So if Montgomery doesn't have bell cow work, that's problematic. Breece Hall, I still think Michael Carter's involved a bit. So look, I love Elijah Mitchell. Again, everybody knows that. I'd like him in the 5th round, but the way the running backs were drying up, I just had to go with Mitchell. Again, even if he doesn't get a full complement of carries, having a mobile quarterback and Trey Lance in there is going to really open the field for him and give him a lot bigger holes than he had last year. If he gets 15 carries a game as opposed to the over 20 he had last year, I still think he's a slam dunk cash in that ADP. People don't like him. He was a 6th round pick. His measurables blew that away. But that said, I'm a Mitchell guy. I gladly went with Mitchell. So at that point now, I have 2 running backs and 2 receivers, and I'm on track because the running back fall off is going to be huge. I am not going to address running back for a while here, and I'll explain when I get to that. So at my 5th pick, it is definitely going to be a receiver here. And right before my pick, Metcalf went off the board, and I was conflicted because I was kind of hoping somebody would take Metcalf because as I love him as a player, and I think he's an elite talent, that quarterback situation is just horrific, and I just don't know how well he could produce for fantasy. So the receivers on the board at this point, Chris Godwin is coming back from the injury. We're not quite sure. Gabe Davis, Darnell Mooney, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Rashad Bateman, and Juju Smith-Schuster. So there's a good collection of receivers available in this 5th round. I opted to go with Darnell Mooney because of all those players. I believe he is going to continue to be a target hog. He had like 140 targets last year, and he had a really good connection with Justin Fields and with a training camp together. I'm very excited. So he was the 25th receiver off the board. And so, again, I took him. You could make a case for any one of the other guys that I listed, but Mooney's a player who I think is way more than what we expected when he came into the NFL. He really runs a pretty diverse group of routes, and I think he's very difficult for defenses to handle. So I think I liked him there. So then we get to the 6th round. Now, mind you, this is tight end premium. And so at this point, the usual 5 are off the board. Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts, actually 6 are off the board. Waller and Kittle are the typical 5. Dalton Schultz went in the 4th round in this draft. So now we had them off the board. And then in the 6th round, Dallas Goedert went off the board. So now I'm right at that point where my last guy is Zach Ertz. I do like Cole Kmet a lot, but Cole Kmet to me is a couple rounds later in a draft. I don't want him there. And so really it was like, I'm really hoping there are 3 picks after Goddard went off the board. And Elijah Moore also went before me, and he's a player I love as well. And I would have been conflicted about him. But Zach Ertz did fall to me in the 6th round. He was the 9th tight end off the board at this point. To me, that's outstanding value. It's exactly what I would have paid. So I was able to maintain. I got lucky there because if somebody took him, that would have really pushed me into a difficult spot because I didn't like any of the receivers on the board. I didn't want to reach for a quarterback yet in the 6th round. And so I lucked out there because sometimes the players in your tiers dry up, and then you have to actually just say, okay, well, if they dry up, I have to find a position where I'm palatable or good to take a position. But again, I lucked out. Now in the 7th round, so there was a little bit of run of quarterbacks. 7 quarterbacks were off the board. The 2 picks before me. So far, the quarterbacks off the board were obviously Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and then Kyler Murray was the 4th quarterback. Lamar Jackson went. Then the 2 picks before me, Jalen Hurts and Russell Wilson. Well, I have Joe Burrow ranked as my QB3, argue with it if you will or whatnot, but I also had T. Higgins. And now realizing this many quarterbacks are off the board, this is where the run in these high-stakes leagues take place. So Joe Burrow was definitely my guy, and I got Burrow. And by the time I picked next, there would have been 3 more quarterbacks off the board. So it was a optimal time to take a quarterback. I always say this, after about 6 or so quarterbacks go off the board this year, that's when you start looking. And that was my point with tight ends as well. When about 6 go off the board, that's when you start planning. And that worked out in both cases for me. And I also got Burrow to be stacked with T. Higgins. So that was very nice for this type of best ball league as well. So now when we come around, I'm into the 8th round. At this point, I have 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end, and a quarterback. So most, aside from the flex, most of my lineup is set. I really need a running back here. And so at the point I'm picking in the 8th round, again, this is really, really drying up. The running backs on the board are Damian Harris, Kareem Hunt, James Cook, Chase Edmonds, Ramondre Stevenson. Now, Stevenson's been rocketing up. He normally would go in about the 10th round, but I like Chase Edmonds. Again, he's getting paid. He's getting paid good money more. The other running backs on the team, Mostert and Michelle, are really making deep backup money, whereas they made a 2-year commitment to Edmonds, and I do believe he'll be a factor here. But again, as my 3rd running back, 30th running back up the board, I think it's plenty of upside, and I think there's a reasonable floor there as well. So I really felt solid with him being, of the running backs who were left, he's one of the most likely guaranteed workload. So I was good there. And then then Stevenson did go a few picks later, early in the 9th, before I was up in the 5th. I may have taken another running back there. Kenny Gainwell went in the 9th round to a team called Wolf Ticket. That was like 3 rounds before ADP. I was targeting him in the 12th round. Like, this is a type of draft, though, when you have to win first place in the points for the whole season, it's not the playoffs. So you get your guy. So 9th round, wow, but he got his guy, so it's cool. So anyway, in the 9th round, I needed another receiver. Receivers, Brandon Ayuk had just gone off the board. The receivers on the board right now, Chris Olave, Sky Moore, Tyler Boyd, Russell Gage, who's been falling since Julio Jones signed, and Robert Woods. Well, Robert Woods is healthy right now, coming off the ACL, and I really believe he'll be a very productive target for Ryan Tannehill. He'll be available and to be open on routes, confident route runner. So I think it was a very good wide receiver 4 there. He was wide receiver 44 off the board. I won't painstakingly go through every pick, but I'll tell you how the rest of the draft went. So now you really do need to take a second quarterback somewhat early in these best ball leagues, because if you have an injury or if, even the one bye week, but you've got to have yourself protected. So I actually planned in this draft, I don't want to I'll explain this now. I expected to come out with Trey Lance and Justin Fields and then a 3rd quarterback. I was going to be very risky on my quarterbacks with high upside rushing guys. And when Burrow fell to me in the 7th, I couldn't take Trey Lance, because much as I love Trey Lance, there's risk involved. Burrow, to me, there's no risk. And then when I came back, Fields was on the board still. But the reason I took Kirk Cousins is I have Justin Jefferson. I figured, why not stack them? I've got 2 very good quarterbacks. Cousins will be in a pass-heavy system now. And then, so my running backs now the rest of the way, I picked up 3 more running backs. I picked up Nyheim Hines and Marlon Mack. Both, Nyheim Hines could have spike weeks. The coach wants to get him involved in the passing game. It won't be in every week. I don't have to pick one to start him. So he was a good RB5. Marlon Mack in Houston, they have a very easy run schedule per Warren Sharp this year. He is the current starter. Don't know how long that holds, and I like that. And then at the very end of the draft, everything was like done in the 9th round. There's like nobody left. And so knowing I have James Conner, knowing he occasionally misses time, not sure who will be the backup. Darrell Williams was long gone, but I don't have a high opinion of him. I think his line is way worse this year. I grabbed Benjamin, a little lottery ticket. Who cares, right? And then at receiver, my last picks, I took Julio Jones in the 12th. I expect that he's going to have limited snaps, but he'll have some spike weeks. And in the 12th round, even if he has 4 spike games, it's very useful to me. Nico Collins in the 14th, he Trubisky will be the starter in Houston. He started to develop a little bit down the stretch. Jamison Crowder in the 60s, playing in the slot for Josh Allen. To me, why not? There's points to be had there. And then tight ends in the 12th and 17th round. You need to have 3 tight ends in this format because if you can't take zeros if a tight end gets hurt. So Austin Hooper, he had been a top 5 tight end with the Falcons. When he went to Cleveland, he was in a 3-man committee, didn't get enough work there, but now he's in Tennessee, should be a good option there. Did I really want Robert Woods and Austin Hooper on the same team? No, but it's best ball, so it's fine. I should have probably taken Ryan Tannehill to stack all 3 of them since I was invested in them, but I chose not to, which, I could have gotten him at any point later. I could have gotten him where I took Crowder in the 16th round. And I think if I could do it over again, I just may have done that because Crowder was a nice pick, but Tannehill would have been my 3rd quarterback and it would have given me that 3 stacks on my team. So anytime those passing games went off, I would have been in good shape. My last tight end, and I think this is a great late round dart, is Tyler Conklin. We know CJ Uzomah had the 490-yard season last year. He's a blocker. Tyler Conklin took work away from Irv Smith 2 years ago. So with the Jets, they're not going to be high volume in the passing attack, but Tyler Conklin is a tight end 3 in a tight end premium league. Why not? And then round 18 and 20. The quarterbacks were dried up. Davis Mills was sitting out there. And I've got Nico Collins and Marlon Mack, and the Texans are terrible. I get it. But they're going to have weeks where they score. Mills had some 300-yard games last year. So I did that little stack. So I think that was fine. And then in the last pick, all the players were throwaways. Everybody was like, if somebody gets hurt, maybe this guy gets in. So you know what? I didn't want a 4th quarterback. Nobody does. Mitch Trubisky was there. He won 2 milli makers for people years ago. He's got mobility. You know what? Is better than taking a throwaway pick like Sammy Watkins or James Prochet or Randall Cobb. So that's the route I went. So draft strategy, be pliable, be willing to go with the flow of the draft, but make sure you have a long vision as you do your draft because you've got to piece this thing together. It's a puzzle and it's in real time and it's while people are taking your players. All right. Have a great day, everybody.